Well, hey there, pharmacy owners. Dr. Lisa Faast here, CEO of DiversifyRx and our upcoming Pharmacy Profit Summit. If you are a pharmacy owner, you need to be at our Pharmacy Profit Summit. All right, I'm talking about a little bit of a philosophical topic today. I'm going to start out with a question. Are you a pharmacy owner or are you a pharmacy employee? Now, if you need to pause and think about that, feel free to do so. But I think this is a really important distinction. We talk a lot about pharmacy ownership. I talk a lot about pharmacy ownership. I own pharmacies. I currently own 2 pharmacies and trying to buy a third. And I think a lot of pharmacy owners are kind of stuck in the, yes, I own this pharmacy, so I carry all those burdens of the pharmacy owner, and I'm also an employee. Now, I won't ever give you false hope that every single pharmacy can have a fully staffed, thing. Like, I know many people that are in a, town of 500 in the middle of the mountains. Like, you're probably going to be the staff pharmacist in that pharmacy. There's still lots of things that you can do to behave more like an owner. But, realistically, having a fully staffed and, you're far away from your pharmacy on a day-to-day basis is probably not likely. However, for most other pharmacies, I think it is highly likely. Like, you can be a pharmacy owner. Now, if you choose to also be the pharmacist or be the technician or be the compounder, if you choose to do the things you like, that's kind of the perk of pharmacy ownership. And so I really want to make a distinction between pharmacy owner, or what we call pharmacy CEO, and a worker bee in your pharmacy, and you also happen to own it. Those are very different hats. And I always talk a lot about pharmacy owners wearing many different hats. I've been there. When I started my pharmacy, it was me and one other person and a family member, and I wore all the hats. You wore the janitor hat and the accountant hat and the pharmacist hat and the, clerk hat. Like, you wear everything. So of course, if you're a startup, this doesn't really apply to you. This is really applying to those seasoned pharmacy owners, and you just feel kind of stuck. You feel like you almost have the golden handcuffs of a good job, where it's like, I'm doing okay. I'm making, $150,000 a year is my take home, and I get some perks from being a pharmacy owner. But it's kind of like those golden handcuffs where things are like, okay, they're not so bad that you're willing to, run away at 1,000,000 miles an hour or do something drastically different. But they're also not so good that you're truly 100% happy. And I think that's the conundrum in a lot of pharmacy owners, is where there's this middle, and nobody's happy in the middle. Nobody likes lukewarm, ness. It's either hot or cold. If you're at one of the extremes, action is really easy to take when you're at those extremes. But when you're in the middle, you feel very stuck. And so a lot of pharmacy owners that I talk to nowadays just are in that middle. They feel stuck. They don't get the true benefits of pharmacy ownership, which is financial freedom, time freedom, knowing they're making a big impact, being able to provide for a lot of people in their community. Like, those are some of the benefits of pharmacy ownership. They get some of them, they might get a perk or two, but they don't get the full breadth of the benefits of pharmacy ownership. They feel a little bit more like their own employee. They're their own boss, they're their own employee. And, they feel still tied to the, 8 to 7, 8 to 6, weekends every weekend, or, maybe they get to switch off every other weekend, but you still feel very much like an employee of the business. And that means you are burdened on both sides, like both ends of the spectrum. So I know, like, so for my pharmacies, I own 2 pharmacies. I don't work in the pharmacies. Yes, I help out. Yes, I talk with my employees and I do things and I manage, the employee bonus programs, and, order new HEPA filters for the compounding, lab, and all those kinds of things. But I don't work in the day-to-day of the business. I truly own those pharmacies. I can ignore that they exist and they will still go on working. Now, obviously, I think when I don't ignore them and I put some effort into them, they perform better, but it's not absolutely necessary for them to operate. And then there's the other spectrum where, when I started my first pharmacy, and I was literally everything. Like, that pharmacy was not open a single minute that I wasn't inside the store. And I truly was, balled and chained to the pharmacy. And then, like I said, most people kind of live somewhere in the middle. And so they get all the burdens of employment, which is you have to be there, the hours, no sick days, no vacation days. Hell, some of you aren't even paying yourself as an employee. So you get all the burdenship of an employee, and you get all the burdens of the owner stuff. You worry about the cash flow, the payments, the, who else is off, who you're giving time off to, who you're hiring, who you're firing, like all of those burdens. And I think that's why so many pharmacy owners just feel like they're drowning. Yes, the cash flow and all those kinds of things that has been happening in our industry for the last year or two have definitely piled on, but this is not a new phenomenon. This is something I've been ruminating on after years and years of talking to pharmacy owners. It's the feeling of stuck, and you really have the burden of both. Like, I love owning my pharmacies, partly because I don't have to. Like, owning them is something that I choose to do. Working in them or spending time in them is something I choose to do. And the fact that I have that freedom to choose is what actually takes off the burden. Like, I still have all of the burdens of pharmacy ownership, but it's the fact that I choose to have them. It's a mindset shift. And I'm not really big into kind of woo-woo stuff, but how you approach something, it's like I have to or I get to. And that's really a huge difference. And so I think a lot of pharmacy owners, they just feel stuck in the have to. So anyways, if you feel like you're there, how do you get out, right? Like, how do you take yourself out of that in order to be able to enjoy the benefits of pharmacy ownership, choose to have those burdens, and really love pharmacy ownership again? And so that's what I like to call the pharmacy CEO. You need to start operating like a CEO. And there's not a magic wand. It's not like next week you can just take yourself off the schedule and life is going to work just fine. It's going to take gradual time, but that's one of the reasons why, inside our membership, the very first thing that we do with membership or members inside the membership is we focus on improving cash flow and increasing profitability. Because once you have cash flow coming, once you're positive cash flow, you open up a world of choices. Now, if you choose to stay on staff as a full-time pharmacist in doing that, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's your choice as the pharmacy owner. But if you have to do that just to survive because you can't afford to pay yourself, much less somebody else, that's when the burden and the pressure starts to kind of overwhelm and really wear you down. And I feel that's why pharmacy owners get burned out. They don't get burned out because they don't love the work or they can't handle the work. I don't think that's what burned out is. My personal opinion is you feel burned out when you feel like you have no choice and you just feel stuck. So when you become that pharmacy CEO, you start to manage the business instead of just letting the business kind of manage everybody else. And yes, you can do that. I have created an entire step-by-step process on how to do this, on how to help you become that pharmacy CEO. Like I said, step one is fixing that cash flow and fixing that profitability, because once those two things are fixed, you can breathe, you can take a moment, and you can actually start to make some plans when you're not worried about your wholesaler bill, you're not worried about the next payroll, and you're not worried about not paying yourself or your own mortgage payments or those kinds of things. And so that's why that's so critical for step one. Then we start to work on step two, step three, and then step four, very stepwise, in order to help you develop the systems so that your employees know what to do, when to do it, how to do it. You don't have to be there to micromanage them. Nobody likes micromanaging, right? You don't like it, they don't like it, doesn't work for anybody. So then you got to create those systems. And I love this concept of really operating like a CEO. I think it's what's missing in independent pharmacy. Being a CEO, we just are pharmacists first. Those of you that are pharmacists and pharmacy owners, we just kind of default to that, I think, self-identity as I'm a pharmacist first, and I happen to own a business. It's actually easier for people who are non-pharmacists to come into pharmacy and get this and be successful. I will say that, the percentage of pharmacist owners and non-pharmacist owners, the percentage of success is always higher with the non-pharmacist owners because they don't try to wear that burden of being the pharmacist. They immediately approach it from a very business CEO standpoint. That doesn't mean you have to give up your empathy that comes with being a pharmacist. You certainly don't give up patient care. I think as a pharmacist in a healthcare company, patient care comes first. And I think when you take care of patients, like the money flows, like money follows the patient when you take really good care of the patients. Just a big believer in that. So, but we need to start thinking like CEOs. We can't keep thinking like the pharmacist. You can't keep thinking like the janitor. You can't keep thinking like the accountant. You know, you're wearing all these different hats. And so we've got to really start thinking like a pharmacy CEO. So this is just kind of a little rant, little just it's been on me as I've been having some conversations at the end of the year with both some members and non-member pharmacy owners as I've been looking to buy pharmacies. Those of you that follow me know that I'm eagerly looking to buy a third pharmacy. And so I've been talking to a lot of pharmacy owners that are selling or interested in selling, and they just carry this burden. And I think that burden comes from feeling stuck. And so let's help get you unstuck. If you're like, hey, that's me, like just put it in the comments or reach out to me, and we can talk about getting unstuck and going one way or the other. And I think either choice is good, but I don't think the middle is good for anybody. I don't think a double burden of having all the burdens and none of the benefit is good for anybody. And I think anybody would rightfully burn out and probably get really tired. So I want you to love pharmacy ownership like I love pharmacy ownership. I just want to let you know I'm here to tell you that it's possible. And you probably at one point really loved pharmacy ownership, and maybe you just gotten a little disenchanted with it. But it's fixable. You can fix that relationship, make your pharmacy awesome, make it profitable, make it run beautifully without you. I know some of you are like, what? I'm like, yes, like it's possible. So hopefully you found this helpful. I just want to tell you that you're not alone. Lots of pharmacy owners feel like that. And I get to work with you every day to help you love pharmacy ownership again. So, all right, until next time, we will chat again, and feel free to share this with any of your colleagues that you think it might be helpful. So adios, everyone. Bye-bye.